So, if any of you don't know me, which I think I know all of you, my name's Carrie. How I got roped into this, I'm still trying to figure out. And I apologize to all of you for what's about to ensue. Just saying that right now. I have no idea what's going to happen. So, we have an interesting topic today. We're going to be talking about the interpretation of tongues. And it's a doozy. We'll just say that. So, I want you guys all to just picture yourselves walking into a group of people, whether maybe it's a new job, maybe you have this one friend and they're like, come to this party with me. We're going to go, have fun with these people. So you go, you're walking and you're like, okay, you're standing in this group of people. Then they start talking. Yeah, do you remember when Sally and Billy were all doing that thing and there was, some baking soda, the fire hose? Oh my goodness, wasn't that so funny? And you're standing there like, yeah, okay, cool. I have no idea what's going on. I don't know if any of you have ever been in that situation. Maybe it's just me, but I don't like that situation at all. I am an introvert on a good day when I know people. I still am looking for the doors and like, no, don't talk to me. Please don't talk to me. I don't want to talk to anybody. So you might be feeling uncomfortable. Maybe you're just confused. Do you want to be put back in that situation with those people again? I don't know. So it's kind of that whole idea of an inside joke, right? You're on the outside and you have no idea what those people are talking about. So think of it in the church realm now. You walk into a brand new church and somebody's up here speaking in tongues and you're like, what is happening? I have no idea what these people are saying. Are you going to want to stay there? Maybe out of curiosity. Maybe you're more like me and you're going to be like, where's the exit? I'm leaving now. These people need some help. So that is the wonderful thing we're going to be talking about today. So before we dive into the real doozy of a stuff, let's just pray and hope that Jesus is going to be with us because I have no idea what's about to happen. So thank you. I appreciate the confidence. So Jesus, today as we embark on this hard topic of yours, we just ask that, you're just with us today, even those people that were missing because of fair or they're out competing in Georgia for competitions. We just ask that you open our minds, our hearts. And Jesus, we just ask that, show us your presence. Show us how these gifts are supposed to work, whether we're here, whether we're there, just show us your presence. Let us feel your presence. And Jesus, you got to help me with this sermon, man. Please. Pretty please. But we love you, Jesus. Amen. All right. I still am not sure how this is going to go. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at some scripture. And I may have went down a rabbit hole. Sorry. We're going to read through 1 Corinthians 14, verses 22 through 28. And we're going to use the NLT version because the NIV just confused the heck out of me. Even Whitney was trying to explain it to me, and I'm like, I don't get it. Huh? Yeah, she was confused. That's not We're all in trouble. We're all in trouble. So, starting in verse 22. This thing is terrible. I don't like it. No, I want a new mic. We're going to order new mics. Okay, so, starting in verse 22 from the NLT version. So you see that speaking in tongues is a sign, not for believers, but for unbelievers. Prophecy, however, is for the benefit of the believers, not the unbelievers. Even so, if unbelievers or people who don't understand these things come into your church meeting and hear everyone speaking in an unknown language, they will think you are crazy. But if all of you are prophesying and unbelievers or people who don't understand these things come into your meetings, they will be convicted of sin and judged by what you say. As they listen, their secret thoughts will be exposed, and they will fall to their knees and worship God, declaring, God is truly here among you. Well, my brothers and sisters, let's summarize. When you meet together, one will sing, another will teach, another will tell you special revelations God has given. One will speak in tongues, another will interpret what is said. But everything that is done must strengthen all of you. No more than 2 or 3 should speak in tongues. They must speak one at a time, and someone must interpret what they say. But if no one is present who can interpret, they must be silent in your church meeting and speak in tongues to God privately. Now, does everybody get that? Clear as mud? No? Everybody's good? Okay, cool. We'll just skip that part. Okay, so we're going to break it down a little bit because that's the only way that I could actually somewhat understand it. And even then, it's a stretch when I say the word understand. Because as I was reading about this, researching about it, I realized that especially verse 22 is extremely controversial in how it's interpreted. Yay! Thanks a lot. Cool, good terms. Okay, so verse 22 says, when speaking in tongues is a sign not for the believers, but for unbelievers. Prophecy, however, is for the benefit of the believers, not the unbelievers. Now, that verse alone, I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? How is speaking in tongues a sign for the unbelievers? Isn't it a gift from God? So how can it be a sign for someone that doesn't believe? I don't know. That made no sense to me at all. And I was ready to just be like, nope, I'm done with this. Count me out. So let's skip that for now. Trust me, it'll make sense at the end. Kind of. So verse 23 says, even so, if unbelievers or people who don't understand these things come into your church meeting and hear everyone speaking in an unknown language, they will think you're crazy. Where did my other page go? I don't know. So this verse is a lot simpler. Thank you, Paul. This makes perfect sense in my mind. If you go into a church, like we were talking about at the beginning, if you go into a church and they're speaking in a tongue that you have no idea what they're saying, you're going to think they're a little crazy, probably. Just a little. So that's just how we were talking about the inside joke of everything. So verse 23 makes pretty good sense. Think you're crazy for speaking in tongues. So verse 24, but if all of you are prophesying and unbelievers or people who don't understand these things come into your meeting, they will be convicted of sin and judged by what you say. As they listen, their secret thoughts will be exposed and they will fall to their knees and worship God, declaring, God is truly here among you. So the way I look at it here, Paul is saying that if you walk into a church and everybody's prophesying in a language that you understand, you're going to actually think that they know what's going on. They're closer to God, and they're going to draw you closer to God versus pushing you away with the tongues that nobody understands. Right or wrong. So, that being said, I don't think Paul's necessarily saying that speaking prophecy versus speaking in tongues, one's better than the other. It's just a matter of how you do it. So prophesying, you don't need an interpreter. Makes sense? When you have somebody who's speaking in tongues, it doesn't have the same effect if you don't have that interpretation of the tongues, because then people are just confused and they're not going to want to engage. They're going to want to draw further away rather than be drawn in. So what we want to do is draw people closer, right? Not push them away. So that was pretty easy to understand. So then we move on to how Paul summarizes in his letter, because the Corinthians were doing things a little funky, to put it nicely, in the way they were doing church gatherings and stuff. So all through 1 Corinthians, he's going through addressing things that need to change. And towards the end of 14, he summarizes how he wants the community setting, church setting to look in particular when it comes to these gifts that we have. So 26 says, well, my brothers and sisters, let's summarize. When you meet together, one will sing, another will teach, another will tell some special revelation God has given. One will speak in tongues, and another will interpret what is said. But everything that is done must strengthen all of you. No more than 2 should speak in tongues. They must speak one at a time, and someone must interpret what they say. But if no one is present who can interpret, they must be silent in your church meeting and speak in tongues to God privately. So basically, for the purpose of what we're talking about today, the interpretation of tongue stuff, if no one's there to interpret, don't speak in tongues out loud if there's a group setting. Pretty crystal clear, right? But he really emphasizes the fact that everything that's done is for the good of the church and the good of bringing everyone closer to God, wanting to make sure that it's for his purpose. Because ultimately, as we talked about in week 1, he gives out these gifts as he sees fit, right? So now, we look back at verse 22, the most confusing verse, and where I should have just stopped to begin with. Some say that Paul was talking about speaking in tongues is for the unbelievers as a negative sign, that it's a negative sign to the unbelievers that will push people further away from God, which at first glance, I could see that. Because if you walk into that church, you're going to be pushed further away. There's another side that thinks, well, maybe that verse 22 is actually the Corinthians speaking, and there should be quotation marks around that part, and that verse 23 is Paul replying to them. I'm not here to tell you which one's correct because I am no expert. I have no idea. At first, I was like, okay, simple. Yeah, it's a negative sign, and they're pushing people further away. Then I started researching it, going further and further down into the weeds, which I kept being told not to do. Oops. Then I started thinking maybe it really is the Corinthians speaking and Paul's talking back to them. Because if you go through and read everything, it's like, okay, I can actually see where he's going with that. So basically, the moral of verse 22 for me is that's a whole nother sermon in itself on that one verse. Because that one is a real controversy. And there's some really interesting things you can read online. So we're just going to leave that as an open-ended question. Sorry, everyone. I initially had it all like, yeah, this is it. And then I changed my mind and went, no, I don't really think there is a definite answer. So anyway, we need to move on to what I'm actually supposed to be talking about today. That I still am not sure why I'm doing this. So, here we go. Time for a story. So, interpretation of tongues. I am no expert by any means. I have a lot of questions, and I don't understand a lot about it. It's freaky sometimes. It's eye-opening most times. But what I can tell you about it is my personal experience with it, which is something I really wasn't sure I was going to share. Whitney started this series how many weeks ago? Weeks ago. Lots of weeks ago. And when she was planning it out, she goes, hey, you think you'd want to do this? And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. Are you crazy? And she's like, okay, I'll pencil you in. I know we can never imagine Whitney doing anything like that. So anyway, up until Monday of this week, I still was like, I don't know if this should really be happening. I have no idea what to say. I don't know what I'm doing. It's a terrible idea. And of course, she's like, well, pray about it and see what you think. Okay. So I prayed about it. And I prayed about it some more because I didn't like the answer I got. Still got the same answer every time I prayed about it. So here we are. So a few months ago, I think most of you know Merritt and Leah are opening up a adult family home down the road. So they had a blessing for their adult family home. and I was lucky enough to attend. And so everybody's sitting there talking, and me being the introvert I am, I'm trying to hide in the corner, even though I knew all the people, most of the people there. I'm trying to hide in a corner. I know. Don't be surprised. So I'm off in my corner, and then it's like, oh, it's time to eat. Oh, no, I'm not going to eat. You don't ever say no to them. You're going to eat. Whether you're hungry or not, you're going to eat. Learned my lesson there, which I'm glad I did, because I got to experience Ethiopian food for the first time, and I'm a fan. It was good. So now, to set the stage, they have a table in the kitchen, and Joy was sitting at one end of the table. I was sitting here. Leah was sitting here. Whitney was sitting across the table from me. Not a big table, but, just so keep that in the back of your mind. So after everybody was done eating and everything, everybody started praying. So Whitney prayed. Merritt's family prayed. As Merritt's dad was praying, I had my eyes closed, and I remember Ari was over here playing. I could hear her playing. And then Whitney's voice, loud as can be, like we're literally sitting right here and she's talking. That's how it sounded. Whitney's voice was praying in tongues. I remember thinking in my head, like, what are you doing? Like, quiet. I just kept my head down, and I'm just like, what are you thinking? So that happened for a while. But the weird thing is that as she was talking, speaking in tongues, I could hear the words. And then in my head, I had this English translation in my head. Not a word for word translation. It was just like, here's a bunch of words. Here's the meaning of it. I'm like, heck is that? Okay. So I didn't really think anything of it because I had never experienced anything like that. And I was just kind of, all right, well, that happened. Cool. So Merritt ended all the prayers, and I'd ridden over with Whitney because I don't know why, but anyway, we had rode over together. So on the way back to my house, which from their adult family home to my house is less than 5 minutes. Well, in that 5 minutes, we get in the car, and I'm like, wait, why were you interrupting while he was praying? He looks at me confused and goes, what are you talking about? I'm like, you were talking out loud when Merritt's dad was praying. He's like, no, I really wasn't. Like, okay, you need to stop this because I heard you. Clear as day, like we're having a conversation. I'm like, I wasn't sitting next to you. I was sitting across from you, and I could hear you perfectly. He goes, well, what was I saying? I was like, you were speaking in tongues. She's like, yeah, I was, but it wasn't out loud. I'm like, what now? It was probably a good thing that I wasn't driving because I may have wrecked. So the thought of Whitney not saying anything out loud and me somehow hearing her voice clear as day, speaking in tongues, and also getting some kind of interpretation for it is a little freaky. It's a lot freaky, actually. So I remember sitting there like, okay. And I remember she dropped me off. And I was still very, very, very confused. And I don't remember if she called me, I called her, whatever. Either way, we ended up on the phone for a long time. And I'm telling her what happened, and she's like, well, you interpreted what I said. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's no way. And I didn't believe it because, well, I'm hearing voices. Now I'm interpreting languages. I have no idea what the heck they mean. So at this point, if you don't believe in spiritual gifts, this is where you would think I need a head CT. It was overwhelming, to say the least. And so started learning some more about it. I had known a little bit about it, but really dove into it more. And over the next several weeks, more things happened. Sometimes it was Whitney's voice. Other times it was a male's voice. I have no idea whose voice. It was just a male's voice. and I would just hear these tongues being spoken, and then I had some kind of interpretation for it. I don't know. I can't explain it because honestly, the only explanation is came from God. There's no other reason I would be able to hear people when they're not talking unless I had some kind of brain tumor, which, spoiler alert, I don't. So it's intimidating and freaky, and you think you're going crazy because for a long time, very, very long time, I didn't tell anybody about it other than Whitney because she happened to be the one that was there. Nobody knew about it but her. I didn't tell Merritt and Leah about it until last week because I was like, well, if I actually end up doing this, I guess I should probably mention that so it's not some, whoops, here you go. So they didn't know about it. My husband didn't know about it till last night because I was like, oh, well, guess I should break that to him. So when I say I didn't tell anybody, I was scared what people were going to think of me because it's not something you really hear about a lot. It's you hear about somebody going and having this big revelation and prophesying and be like, yes, this is what I heard. You hear about that. You even sometimes hear about people speaking in tongues. But how often do you hear about somebody interpreting tongues? It's not very common. And there's so many unknowns about it. So I was nervous what people would think about me. So, hey, here it is. So when I hear these things, sometimes I really think it's God like, hey, Carrie, you're not listening again. So here's your shock and awe moment. So you actually pay attention because there are times where it's like, okay, yeah, I got it. Like this morning. This morning, when he's like, okay, we pray at 9:30. And I'm like, oh, we do? Oh, I had no idea. So anyway, we show up. Everybody gets in a circle. Anybody that's never been here for pre-service prayer. We come, circle. Carrie prayed. Whitney prayed. So while Carrie was praying, this one over here was standing next to me. Again, not saying anything. And I'm just shaking my head and she starts laughing because she knew what happened. She knew exactly what happened. She was praying in tongues under her breath. And I looked at her, I was like, really? And she smiled and goes, what happened? What'd they say? What happened? What is it? So I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. Most of the time, it's not necessarily for me. Most of the time. Most of the time, it's like when we were at Merritt and Leah's. It was about their adult family home. It was all good things. There's been people that have been ill, stuff like that. Maybe it's a message for them. Maybe it's about some other situation that's going on. Sometimes I don't even know what it's about. And I'm just like, I have no idea what's going on, but I'm supposed to pray about this. So, okay. The good news is, I guess for me personally, is it doesn't freak me out quite as much anymore because I'm kind of used to it. So now I stop and go, okay, what do I need to do? Okay, got it. And like I said, I think part of it is because I am extremely, extremely stubborn. And I don't always listen very well. And so maybe this is just God's like, okay, I need to find a different way to get through to you because I really want you to pray for these things, but you're not listening. Okay, well, it worked. So, yeah. So that's kind of my story of how the last several months have gone because I don't even remember when did you guys do that? It was like it's been December. It was winter time. Something like that. But it's been several months. And so this has been in the making for several months. So sometimes Whitney will be standing like was this morning, and it'll be like, okay, were you doing that? Yeah, okay. But there are other times where I'll hear her voice or a male's voice, and I'm alone. And I'm like, how am I hearing anything when I'm alone? So there's no rhyme or reason to it, which Again, explain it to me other than God. Because if you've got an explanation for it, I'd love to hear it because I can't come up with anything. And my background is very scientific. And I want to know the hows, the whys. And I can't figure it out. So if you can come up with it, please share. So, in my opinion, speaking in tongues, interpretation of tongues, those are the gifts that you really have to have an open mind for. Because, like I said, they're not talked about a lot because it can feel vulnerable, scary, intimidating, any other words that you can come up with. But if you can get past the freaked out portion, it's actually pretty amazing. And I never thought I would say I was glad that it's happened to me, but it's been pretty life-changing for sure in so many ways because it has drawn me closer to God. It has brought out something in me that I didn't know I had. I pray about things that never would have popped into my head otherwise. So I really think it's been good, not just for me, but for everybody else, all the other things that I'm praying about, because it is bringing my attention to what's going on. Like I said, I'm stubborn. So I can't tell you how to practice this gift. I can't tell you to pray for it and it'll happen. I didn't. It just happened. But if you are interested or you think you want this gift, pray for it. Ask God about it. See what happens. What's Whitney's favorite thing? What do you always say? You don't know. Yeah, whatever she says. Yeah, that thing. If you've ever spent time around Whitney, she says it about 8 times a day. So ask him about it. If he wants you to have that gift, he will, because he gives those gifts as he sees fit. And if he thinks you need that gift, you never know what's going to happen. So if this does happen to you, please don't think you're crazy. Please don't think, oh my goodness, what is happening right now? I have a brain tumor. Talk to somebody about it. Pray about it. Like, be open to it and see where God leads you. Is it a one and done? He just wanted you to have this one interpretation and then, he'll move on? I don't know. Maybe he really wants you to be out there like, yes, this is what it is. I don't know. He's God. He's going to do his thing. But just be open and be willing to talk about it, not like I was. Do as I say, not as I do, as I tell my kids. So, interpretation of tongues, I don't know a whole lot about it. I'm still learning. But that's what I can tell you about my experience and what I've learned so far. And just be open. I think that's my biggest thing. It's just be open to what Holy Spirit has for you. And he's going to show up some unexpected ways sometimes.